They say the brightest light projects the darkest shadow. But what if that shadow was once the own light? There was a time before the time in which the sky did not know conflict. Between the heavenly choirs and the divine spheres, there lived a creature whose beauty defied all human logic. It was not a simple angel. He was the most beautiful of all. His voice commanded the music of the heavens. His presence illuminated the heavenly courts. And their name, Lucifer. Don't close this video. Listen to me until the end. If you think in God, if you feel there are truths that have been hidden for centuries, this message is for you. Because what you are about to hear, it is not a children's story nor a moral fable. It's a true story, a story so as old as the creation same. And if you decide to look beyond of the veil, you may discover that Lucifer is not who you were told he was. But first, I want to ask you something very simple. If you have faith, if you believe that God reigns over all power and every creature, be it heavenly or fallen, write in the comments this phrase: God's light shines even in the midst of the shadows. Do it now. It's not just a phrase, it's a statement of your faith. And if you're still here, I invite you, stay until the end. Don't close this video. What I have to tell you can completely change your view on the good, evil, and what lies between them. And if you truly believe in God, leave your like. Not because of the algorithm, not because of the channel, but as an act of affirmation. Like someone says, I am on the side of the true, even if it hurts. Now yes, let me take you back to the beginning of everything, to a place where the darkness did not yet exist, and where the light had name, Lucifer. Before the first star burned in his sky, before the time had form, there existed a sacred hierarchy. Among cherubim and seraphim, one rose above the rest, Lucifer, whose name in Latin means light-bearer. It was no minor title. Lucifer, it was not simply an angel more. According to ancient interpretations of passages such as Ezekiel 28, was described as the large, protective, perfect cherub in beauty. It was adorned with precious stones, onyx, topaz, jasper, sapphire, not out of vanity, but because their function was glorious. It was said to reflect the light of God like no another created being. Lucifer had access to the holy mountain, the dimension closest to the divine throne. It was the guardian of the balance, the perfect echo of heavenly power. His voice commanded the songs of the angels, and when he sang his praise, the entire universe seemed to respond. In essence, Lucifer was light, not as we know it, but a conscious, vibrant, breathing light, wisdom and beauty. It was the living expression of the divine harmony, but this is where the mystery begins to take shape, because everything in he was perfection, everything except something that was hiding. In its deepest part of his being, the desire to be more than a reflection. Lucifer did not want just carry the light. I wanted be the fountain, and that's where the story changes. Not because of a sudden fall, not because of an impulsive betrayal, but because of a slow transformation, a seed sown in the eternity, which germinated silently, right at the edge of God's throne. Can the beauty perfect contain in same, the seed of the pride? Can you, the purest light, begin to look at its own reflection with desire? Lucifer, was he angel of light? Yes. But also was he first in looking at the Creator and wondering if he really should remain under him? It wasn't hate, it was ambition, disguised as admiration. And that ambition soon would set fire the heavens. Nobody it saw come. Not in a place where everything was perfect, where nothing existed evil nor the doubt, but in the highest point of the sky, in the presence itself of the Creator, the pride began to take shape in silence. Lucifer, the bearer of light, had stopped looking at God and started looking at himself same. Why I had to reflect an alien light, if he same radiated splendor? Why sing praises if his own voice was worthy of worship? Was so when formulated an idea that would change everything. I will ascend to heaven, Above the stars of God I will raise my throne. I will be like the Most High. These words, attributed symbolically to him in Isaiah 14:13-14, reveal more than rebellion. They reveal desire, self-idolatry, a dream of divinity on one's own. And he was not alone. It is said that a third of the angels sympathized with his cause, not out of malice, but out of admiration. Lucifer. He had charisma, intelligence, beauty. He was inspiring. How resist following the greatest of all angels? But the heaven is not a place without law, and before him challenge stood up an opponent, the archangel Michael. So a war broke out, not with swords or fire, but with will and spiritual power, light against light, honor against ambition. Michael uttered a phrase that resonated throughout the eternity, "Who is like God?" And with that statement began the fall. Lucifer, the bright, the beloved, was cast out, not by divine hatred, but by eternal justice. The light that wanted becoming its own sun, she was condemned to wander without heaven, without throne, without choir. Since then, his name no longer evoked beauty, but terror. Lucifer transformed in Satan, the adversary, and what began as a whisper of ambition ended as a cry of eternal rebellion. But the story doesn't end there, because different traditions, they began to tell this story with nuances very different. Some it come as the supreme enemy, others as the bearer of a truth prohibited. The image of Lucifer that inhabits the collective unconscious is the of the supreme demon, the enemy of God. But what if that image not out as clear as we were taught? In the tradition original Judaica, the term Lucifer nor does not even appear. The passage in Isaiah 14, from which it is extracted the famous, "How you fell from the heaven, O Lucifer, son of the tomorrow," he was not talking about an angel, but of a human king, possibly the one from Babylon, whose arrogance it led to the ruin. The word Hebrew used was Hallel wel Shajar, which means shine of the sunrise. It was only centuries after, with the translation of the Bible into Latin by St. Jerome, that term was converted into Lucifer and later linked with Satan by later theologians. In other words, the association between Lucifer and the devil, it was a theological construction, not an original dogma. In Christianity, this figure was consolidated as a symbol of rebellion against God. The fathers of the church merged the story of Isaiah, the visions of Ezekiel, and the fall described in Apocalypse to form a single enemy, the fallen angel, now the devil. But in Gnosticism, early esoteric current persecuted by the church, the history takes an unexpected turn. For many Gnostics, Lucifer was not evil, but a bringer of knowledge, a being who challenged a tyrant god, the demiurge, to offer to the humanity the spark of the consciousness. In this vision, Lucifer represents spiritual awakening, the inner light that drives us to question the structures imposed. This same idea was collected by current occultists, such as the Theosophy and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. There, Lucifer is seen as a symbol of enlightenment, not destruction. Even in Islam, although the figure of Iblis, the closest equivalent, also disobeys God, he does this out of spiritual pride, not malice. He refuses to bow down to Adam because he was created from fire, not clay. What does all this mean? It means that the figure of Lucifer has been shaped by the lens of each tradition, now as a monster, now as a martyr of knowledge. And the more we dig, the more questions emerge. Was it really the enemy? Or was silenced by those who they feared your light? That would happen if the image of the devil we were taught was nothing more than a strategic construct. What if the figure of Lucifer wasn't eliminated for being evil, but for being dangerous to the powers that be? For centuries, the church controlled access to knowledge. Any idea that would challenge your official interpretation was branded as heresy. The Gnostic texts, the apocryphal Gospels, the philosophies ancient, were condemned, buried, or rewritten. Among these texts were radically different worldviews. Some, they claimed that the true knowledge, the gnosis, did not come from the obedience blind, but of the inner search. And in that context, Lucifer was not the enemy, but the symbol of that awakening. Because a symbol of light was turned into a symbol of evil. Because light can illuminate, but also reveals what others wish to hide. Lucifer did not represent chaos, but the rebellion against the order established. And that order, for centuries, was the ecclesiastical authority. Thinkers like William Blake, Milton, even certain Renaissance alchemists saw in Lucifer as not a demon, but an archetype of spiritual liberation. He who falls, not out of hatred, but out of questioning. He who suffers, not out of punishment, but out of choice. He knowledge about the obedience. And then arises the uncomfortable question, how many truths were suppressed in name of the salvation? Organizations such as the Templars, the Cathars, and the Rosicrucians were exterminated or persecuted for deviating from the doctrine. But many of his teachings were aiming at its same, that within the human being there exists a divine spark, and that this spark can be ignited by the true, not for the fear. And what is Lucifer, if not that? Inner fire that refuses to go out. Maybe your the greatest sin was not to defy God, but to awaken the divine spark in the human being. And that, for a system that thrives on control, is unacceptable. The darkest thing about Lucifer, perhaps, is not his fall, but the systematic censorship of his true face. Because if the light we carry within us carries his name, so who we have been calling enemy all this time. Although was expelled from the heaven, Lucifer never ceased to dwell among us, not as a literal presence, but as a symbol, powerful, ambivalent, fascinating. Throughout the centuries, its image evolved. From being an enemy of God, he transformed in a character complex, tragic and deeply human. In literature, appears as the lucid rebel in John Milton's Paradise Lost, where he challenges an authoritarian God, not out of hatred, but out of dignity. In the philosophy, Nietzsche does not names directly, but your call to kill God resounds with the echo of that ancient heavenly rebellion. Lucifer incarnates the eternal tension between obeying or waking up. It is not just a religious figure, it is an archetype that inhabits our deeper decisions. In art has become inspiration, in music a symbol of transgression, in cinema and the television has been portrayed not only as a villain but as an anti-hero, as a protector misunderstood, like a fallen angel who still maintains a sense of justice. But his most powerful legacy is in the psychological. Lucifer represents the shadow that we all carry inside, that part that questions, that rebels, that wants to find its own path. Carl Jung spoke of integrating that shadow, not denying it, because only by looking into the abyss within us can we begin to understand our true light, and perhaps that is why his figure endures. Because Lucifer is the reflection of the human soul in conflict between what we were taught we should be and what we really are. No, this is not a defense of evil. It's an exploration of the symbol. Because if we ignore what Lucifer represents, we also run the risk of ignoring our ability to discern, to create, to challenge the established when stop serving the true. And have you ever felt that inner spark that says, there's something more? That it's also part of his legacy, because Lucifer, as a symbol, didn't come to destroy the light, but to force us to seek it for ourselves, themselves. And that is a battle that is not fought in the heavens, but in the deepest part of the human heart. Now that having arrived here, you must ask yourself, who was it really, Lucifer? An angel? Proud man who defied God, or a symbol distorted by those who they feared your light? Maybe both, or maybe something more. Throughout this trip we saw how his figure was shaped by the history, by the religion, for power. We saw how he was interpreted as a demon, as a rebel, as a bearer of light, and even as a symbol of spiritual freedom. But beyond dogmas and theologies, Lucifer represents a question that burns in the human soul. Should we blindly obey or seek the true? It costs whatever it costs. And in that dilemma, we are all part of it conflict, because within us there is a reflection of that same tension, a voice that wants give up, and another who wants to fly. One part that fears, and another that burns to understand. Lucifer fell, yes, but his history, it was written in each one who decides to look beyond of the fear. Every time you wonder why you were taught certain things, every time you question it established, you are walking through that same edge between light and shadow. And now, I make you one last invitation. Share this video with someone who is also looking for answers. Not to convince him, but to start a conversation that leads silenced for centuries. And tell me in the comments, is Lucifer an enemy or a mirror? Your vision, your voice, can help others look at things differently. Angle. If this story made you think, if it challenged you what you believed, if it left you with more questions than answers, then already fulfilled its purpose. Subscribe to the channel, because here we will continue to unearth the truths that the time and power wanted to bury. And if there is a mystery, a being, a forbidden text that you want us to explore in the next video, leave it written below. This channel isn't just mine, it's yours, it's ours. It belongs to everyone who dares to look where no one else wants to look. See you in the next revelation. And remember, not all that glitters is light, and not all shadow is the absence of God.